Sampling in qualitative research. Dear students, we have been discussing about qualitative research studies, and we should know that what sampling techniques are available for qualitative studies. Okay? Since in qualitative studies, we are concerned with insight or opinions and experiences, views. So therefore, we are required to go for very specific techniques for sampling for qualitative research. Okay, the aim of qualitative study is always to generate a sample which allows understanding, because we need to explore the in-depth analysis, the in-depth understanding through qualitative studies. Okay, so for that purpose, we are required to generate a sample which allows us to understand, and that understanding is a thorough understanding. It's a very in-depth understanding. Okay, so that's the aim of a sampling in qualitative studies, that we need a sample which could generate maximum information, right, and which could give us every aspect of the sample. Okay, so that's the point. And then we have different techniques for sampling techniques related to qualitative studies. We have purposive sampling, right? Because the sampling is based on a particular purpose, right? So it is not random sampling as in the case with quantitative studies. For qualitative research, we have purposive sampling, and the identification of missing voices, they are considered while collecting data, right? When the data collection is going on, then the researcher can think about some missing voices, and then he can, modify the data collection, and he can add up those missing voices. That's one feature of qualitative study. Okay, so the size is also important to be mentioned about qualitative study, is that the size is not quite large in qualitative studies, because large sample size is the feature of quantitative studies. For qualitative study, we most of the time have the sample size which is quite small, but the point is that it should adequately answer the research question, right? So when the research question is answered, that's enough. That's the limit of sample for qualitative research. Okay, and time and resources, of course, they are considered, and within given time and resources, the answers are to be found, right? So the aim, the technique, and the size of qualitative studies are really to be considered while discussing the sampling techniques used in qualitative research. Now let me take you to the most commonly used sampling techniques in qualitative studies. The first one is snowball and chain sampling. Snowball sampling is when you select a sample and that sample further refers you to some other sample, right? So it's like snowball, okay? The game snowball. So that's the chain sampling. That's also called the chain sampling. When your sample takes you to another sample. Then we have extreme deviant case sampling. In extreme deviant case sampling is basically the technique is that a very rarely found sample is selected, right? And that sample is a deviant case sampling, because that's the case which is particularly to be explored in the qualitative study, right? The third type, the homogeneous sampling, is basically based on shared features, right? Particular features which are shared by the population or the members of the sample. They have similar, qualification. They have similar age group. They have similar location, geographical location, and they have similar employment, for example. So these are the features which are shared. So whosoever share this feature is the sample, right? So that is called homogeneous sampling. Then the maximum variation sampling is a kind of sampling which is used in qualitative study. In maximum variation sampling is basically the kind of sampling where the samples are included which have maximum variation. Like for example, there is a list of students, for example. So on the list of students, the toppers who are on one extreme, they have maximum scores. So they are taken as sample. But from the bottom, the lowest scorers are also taken. So the lowest scorer and the toppers, the maximum scorers, they are the maximum variation samples. So they are then taken as a sample for this kind of sampling technique. Then the convenience sampling is a kind of sampling which is used, and it is also called grab sampling or accidental sampling. This kind of sampling is sampling where whosoever is conveniently available is made the sample of the study, right? So whosoever is at the closed end and it's close to your hand as researcher, that is included in the study, and it is called convenience sampling. The last kind of sampling given here is opportunistic sampling. Opportunistic sampling is basically the kind of qualitative sampling which is also called emergent sampling. Emergent sampling is basically the samples which are decided during the process of collecting data, right? So that's the kind of, because it's emergent in nature, as the name shows, then it is selected in the process of data collection in the field when the research is going on, and the particular knowledge of a setting or context is known to the researcher. And then the researcher decides to go for a particular sample, right? So that's the kind of opportunistic sampling. And it is particularly adopted in studies like exploratory studies, because in exploratory studies, we do not have previously available examples. It's an exploration of a phenomena. So in this case, we need to go for opportunistic sampling. So these are the most commonly used sampling techniques in qualitative research studies.